Do not remove the fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. It's an adage of the great writer G.K. Chesterton. I've been reading a few of G.K. Chesterton, well, in fact I'm on the 4th out of 4 of the collection of Father Brown stories. The volume I'm reading at the moment is called The Secret of Father Brown. And I have to say, G.K. Chesterton is a writer who has only recently come into my purview, and I have to say I love it because his writings are full of paradox. Father Brown is in many ways diametrically dissimilar to Sherlock Holmes. For instance, he's a squat, rather rotund character, whereas Sherlock Holmes is tall and angular. And of course, whereas Sherlock Holmes is primarily presented as being very matter of factual, Father Brown is similarly factual, but also with a spiritual dimension that you could say is lacking in the Conan Doyle stories about Sherlock Holmes. And what is it about these characters that have this timeless quality? Well, before I dig into that, I just want to talk about a couple of things that have come into my field of awareness over the last couple of weeks or so. But let's just go back to that adage. Don't remove the fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. The first thing, and it's pretty much a direct comparison or analogy, is the situation that is being faced by many European countries in regard to the unfettered immigration of low IQ aliens from third world countries located in various parts of Africa and South Asia, namely Pakistan and India, and the effect that these protected species of people have when they are allowed in against the direct wishes and against all logic of the people. It doesn't take a genius to work it out. And I suppose right now it's a good opportunity for me to discourse on the fiasco, the rigged game, the wholly controlled circus that is known as the World Cup. Currently being staged, and I use the word correctly, being staged in Mexico, Canada and the United States of America. What a fucking shit parade. First of all, it's an entire Freemasonic operation, as I've detailed in various essays and discourses previously. Secondly, it is rigged. There is no doubt about it. Because, and I'll name just 2 examples, France and Argentina, in their various games, would apparently, in their last 2 games, would have not got through were it not for corrupt officiating. And that's before we even dig into the bribing of the officials, the grifting of the likes of the head of FIFA, Infantino, and the rest of it. It's an absolute shit show, and I haven't watched a single game yet. These are just snippets that I have picked up. But for me, if we go back to this adage about not taking the fence down, not removing the fence until you know why it was put up in the first place, does it not apply directly to the unfettered immigration levels? Previously, countries had borders that weren't soluble. They weren't dissolving before our very eyes. I mean, particularly the Isles of Britain. You know, it's an island. The only way you could get in would be via the sea and or the air, and there were border controls. Nowadays, you've got unfettered amounts of aliens coming in across the channel. Not all of them on rubber dinghies, but some in the backs of lorries, in the backs of vans, on the ferries. In fact, the vast majority are not coming in on the dinghies. Let's just be clear about that. That's just another aspect of the circus, a circus that is being controlled and funded by the communist billionaire. And there's a clue in that expression because it sounds like an oxymoron, but it is a correct expression. The communist billionaire we Georgie Soros, who is a cunt, there's no doubt about it, but it's his job to see that the protocols of the Elders of Zion are adhered to, and that Western European countries are subjected to mass immigration as a crazy attempt to dilute the population into a sort of international beige of limited IQ and therefore of a more slave-like attitude, shall we say. In other words, limited IQ equals easy to manipulate, and that's what's going on. Last night, apparently, Morocco were playing France, and there was rioting down the Edgware Road. The Edgware Road in London. Apparently there were loads of Moroccans out on the streets, and at one point they turned to attack the police in fucking London. You know, I mean, the first question would be, well, we can see here exactly what's happened. We can see that the unfettered immigration has reached absolutely insane levels, where you've got Moroccan fans rioting in the streets, in the Edgware Road, in protest at a 2-0 defeat to France. And you would say, well, Morocco, that's North Africa, isn't it? And you would be correct to make that assertion. But if you look at the French team, it is also wholly African, or should I say unholy African, because each and every player in the French team is of African origin and or Arabian origin. And I know this has been going on for a few years, but it is a complete mindfuck. But then again, when you realise what the aim of the game is, you will see that it's not really to be expected, because France, even more than the so-called United Kingdom, has fallen for this mass immigration trick for the importation of Africans from its former colonies and what have you. And even at this late stage, we are still looking at a mass overrepresentation of players in the French team who are African. The England team isn't much better, and this is one of the reasons why, contrary to how I used to be, I don't have any leaning or any allegiance to the current England football team. Why? Because it's populated mostly, the squad of 26 is populated mostly by Africans. And for me, this is just like political rectness or correctness on steroids. Because in no way are those French and or English teams representative of the general population of those countries. Especially in England, for even right now, the African population is only a small percentage of the overall population. And this is, of course, in a country that invented the game. I mean, you could say, well, it's just a Freemasonic game anyway, it's all bullshit. But what we're looking at is a situation in which, say it was England versus France in the World Cup final, it would be simply a case, would it not, of our Africans versus their Africans. The Anglo-Africans versus the Franco-Africans. And what does that actually mean? It means fuck all. It's like me going to Nigeria and claiming I'm a Nigerian, or going to Outer Mongolia and claiming I'm Mongolian. You can't just be of a particular nationality because you were born there. It doesn't work that way. Or you've been living there for a certain amount of time. It does not work that way. So the whole thing is preposterous. And say it serves as a reminder to what G.K. Chesterton was saying. Don't take that down the fence until you know why it was put up in the first place. So the World Cup is just blatant poppycock. Maybe it's the World Poppycock Cup. Perhaps a more accurate example. I've got on my site an interesting graphic, or should we say meme, which illustrates this point perfectly and means I don't have to go into any further detail by way of explanation. Another example of this incoherent stupidity that is manifesting at every level of the so-called and fake control system is, again, illustrative of the point Chesterton was making. And it's the UK governments, the unrepresentative, unelected, criminal UK government's attempt not only to limit people's access to one or two social media channels, as I discussed previously, but also to limit people's access to VPNs, virtual private networks. Now, by way of analogy, back in the day, we're talking, from my childhood through the 70s and into the 80s, if I wanted to communicate with a friend when I was at university, we would write letters to each other. Now, you would not ever consider finishing your letter, putting it in the envelope, sticking the stamp on, and not sealing it. So what the UK government is attempting to do is remove a fence that was constructed for very good reasons. In other words, why the fuck would you want anyone to have access to a private message that you were sending to someone else? What on earth has it got to do with anyone, what you write in a letter to someone else? And it's the same principle here. Communication can and should be private. Communication between two individuals can and should be private. What business is it of the UK government to have access to anybody's emails, their messages, and their location? You pop a letter in the letterbox, nobody need know where you were when you sent it. Why would they need to know? And what reason would they have for needing to know your fucking location? I hope you see the point I'm making here, because it is very straightforward. Everybody has the right to privacy. And how ironic it is that fucking fat boy slaphead Klaus Schwab has basically, he made a statement saying you will not have, there will be no privacy, just as he said you will own nothing and you will be happy. He's claimed that there will be no privacy, and then lo and behold, recently this week it came out that his private accommodation had been bugged, and as a consequence of that he was suing some entity that he alleges were involved in the bugging of his home. So here we go, Schwab. It's one rule for thee and one rule for me, isn't it? You see what I mean? He doesn't like it when his privacy is infringed upon, and yet the fucking idiot wants to infringe upon other people's privacy. They really are a set of fucking crypto Jewish cunts, and the sooner they are removed from office the better. So the man, is it going to work? No, it's not going to fucking work, because you can't really take away people's privacy. It can't be done. The simplest solution will be just to have nothing to do with these electronic devices and to step away from the entirety of the net. And I, for one, would have no problem doing that whatsoever. None whatsoever. But it does illustrate the point. We are dealing with a kleptocracy, a group of thieves and common criminals, all who are operating through the aegis of the Kosher Nostra, in other words, the financial system, the head honchos of which are the Rothschilds, and ultimately they are complete and utter fuckwits, because they do not understand the nature of this realm, and they do not understand the nature of mankind. Never has any entity ruled the world. It never will. This is God's realm. Whatever it is, this is God's realm. It's not the realm of the demiurge, and it's not a realm that can be ruled by any one set of people. And those that have tried it in the past have always come a cropper. Their overarching, overinflated egos always bring about their demise and the total collapse of their fiendish plans. So there's a reason to be cheerful. As is often the case, there were a couple of interesting items that popped up in my X or Twitter feed yesterday. One of them was a post by Neil Oliver, formerly of the BBC, aka the Coast Guy, who's, I usually like the cut of his jib, let's put it that way. However, with 500,000+ followers on X, you do wonder, you don't really get to a position like that with so many followers unless you are allowed to, or you are part of the controlled opposition. I'm not saying Neil Oliver is controlled opposition, but I am also not saying that he isn't. And yesterday, his tweet said, here's something along the lines of, here is an interview with Tucker Carlson that you might want to listen to. Well, as soon as I saw that, my thought was, why the fuck would anybody want to listen to an actor like Tucker Carlson, who is part of the controlled opposition? Tucker Carlson has got CIA connections. He's from a family of well-placed, great wealth, intergenerational influence and reach. So why the fuck would I want to listen to someone like him having a conversation with Neil Oliver? I mean, let's just be clear. Neil Oliver did work for the BBC for a number of decades, and you do not get to work for the BBC unless you are vetted and approved by MI5. So make of that what you will. You may say, well, that may be the case, but he's enlightened now, he's woken, etc., etc. Fine, if that's what you want to believe, go ahead. Suck on his teat. But be wary, because he's not always going to be dealing with the truth. And when he's got someone on like Tucker Carlson, or he's appearing on, I don't know which way, whether Tucker Carlson appeared on his platform or whether he was on Tucker Carlson's platform, it doesn't really matter. My point is this: there's nothing organic about Neil Oliver's rise and influence in social media. And if he's not organic, if his followers, I think it's 500,000 followers, if he's not organic, then he's not actually got an organic reach. And in that situation, he would be another example of someone who has been astroturfed into the scene, into the picture. The second thing is of a similar matter, and it concerns Rupert the Bear, aka Rupert Lowe. Rupert Lowe appeared this last week on another controlled opposition platform. This one, it was this one being called the Joe Rogan Experience. It's quite a successful controlled opposition platform, I'll grant him that. At one time, if it's not still the case, his was the most watched, successful, downloaded podcast on the whole of the controlled interweb. Anyway, the clip I saw, and again, sometimes all you need to see is a clip, featured Rupert Lowe talking about the Fabian Society and Joe Rogan feigning astonishment that the symbol of the Fabian Society is a wolf in sheep's clothing. I mean, are you seriously telling me that Joe Rogan was not already aware of that fact? Again, it's just more fucking codswallop, isn't it? And it brings me on to the issue which I have questioned in the past, namely, is Rupert Lowe and Restore Britain controlled opposition? Because remember, I have challenged him and Restore Britain on a number of occasions to tell us what their position is on the various frauds of the fraudulent financial system. Rupert Lowe was a merchant banker. Rupert Lowe did apparently make a shed load of money from providing masks or personal PEP, the personal fucking protection equipment, during the time of the COVID. And again, you do not go on the Joe Rogan show unless you've got a license, unless you may well be controlled opposition. So why am I saying this? Okay, let's just take it on face value. Rupert Lowe goes on the Joe Rogan show and starts talking how the Fabian Society has infiltrated various aspects of public life. That is true. But what about who or what is behind the Fabian Society? How was it formed? Who were those socialists that were behind it? Who were those socialist founders of the Fabian Society who were influenced by Karl Marx, a notable Jew? And how is all of this connected with the the Jewish overlords, the dark Judo-Zionist overlords who were behind communism and by definition behind socialism as well. Let's be clear, as Douglas Reed makes clear in his book The Controversy of Zion, the two go hand in hand, by which I mean Judaism and communism are two sides of the same coin. But does Rupert Lowe know this? Does Rupert Lowe understand that his party has seemingly been infiltrated already by said forces of communism, by a Zionist who was formerly in the Tory party? Does he know this? And if he doesn't know this and he's acting completely innocently, is he really fit for office? For if that is the case, he wouldn't truly know who the enemy is. And none of them, of course, none of these lickspittles, especially those who are former bankers, wish to go anywhere near the subject of Zionism, of Judaism, the Torah, the protocols of the elders of Zion, who controls the financial system, who dominates the print media, the audio media, the visual media, who funds artificial intelligence like Grok, who owns TikTok, what the intentions are of these people, how they regard the great unwashed, the goyim like thee and me, how they regard us as scum, etc., etc. And of course, are these not issues worthy of our attention? Are they not issues worthy of the attention of someone who is presenting himself as a future leader or statesman? Maybe statesman is a better expression. A future statesman of the disunited kingdom? Or is it simply the case that he is demonstrably controlled opposition? Just like Ben Habib, just like Nigel Farage, and all the rest of these, I have to say, wealthy lickspittles, who presumably are paid never to go near the subject of Zionism. You see, it's all very well criticising Islam, and I will be amongst those who will happily criticise Mohammedism. I'll happily call it out for the bullshit that it is, just as I will call out the Freemasons for the bullshit that they promote, and the Jews for the bullshit that their religion is founded upon. Religion being, of course, mind control. That's the very definition of it, to bind the mind. I'll happily call all of these out, and anyone who's parading about, attempting to lord it over the rest of us, falsely claiming that their religion is superior to the next one, when they're all fucking mind control experiments, because they're all fucking brainwashed fools. Just like anyone who's cheering on the England team right now, I'll come back to the England team. Just so how anyone who is English is cheering on the England team right now, I would say is a brainwashed fool. Because if you're watching that team and it never occurs to you that there's an inordinate and overrepresentation of African players in the team who haven't even got anglicised names, players who are from Nigeria and Bongo land, and it doesn't enter your noggin that that is the case, and that the German coach Tuchel, the manager of the team, is actually playing up to this agenda, because after all, he's the one who left behind certain decent players of a true English origin, like, off the top of my head, Maguire and Jack Grealish, to name but two. Then you're blind. You're blind to the facts of the matter. Why would you support a team calling itself England that is made up predominantly of African or African origin players, and or players whose fathers are Jamaican and fucked off at an early age, leaving their white mothers to bring them up? I'll make a prediction. I'm feeling rather bold this afternoon. If I'm going to support any team in this match between England and Norway, I'm going to go with the Norwegians. And why? Because as far as I can see, they've only got one African origin player in the side. And they have a 6'5" Viking centre forward who is a consummate player and of different gravy. People forget, you see, just how powerful the Vikings were, how strong they were, and how they conquered vast tracts and explored huge swathes of the earth. Yeah, so I'll be more than happy if Norway win that match. if England get through, you may well question whether or not it's been rigged and that the game has been fixed in their favour. So I'm going to make a bold prediction. No team that is predominantly African is going to win the World Cup. Well, why are you saying that, you racist bastard? Why are you saying that? Well, first of all, it's never happened. And secondly, I will point you to an article, a greatly undervalued and underread article I wrote on the subject of IQ. You can't get around the fact of the low IQ of these Africans who are from sub-Sahara. In fact, wherever you go in Africa, you have to say the entire continent is dominated by low IQ individuals. And that's fine, But they have no fucking reason to be over here, unless you're of the twisted mindset that believes the Kalergi plan should be implemented and that the white race should be diluted. I mean, how much more racist could that be? But doomed to failure, let me say, doomed to failure. So, yeah, if you've got a head and you are not blinded, you're not wearing the blinkers, the Union Jack blinkers or whatever flag it is, then you'll understand exactly what I'm saying. That is not an English team. That is an Anglo-African team, with the majority of them being of African origin. It's not going to win anything. It's not going to win anything on account of nous. A lot of nous lacking. That's why I'll be very surprised, unless it's rigged for it to happen, that France will win the World Cup. I mean, their situation with their football team is even worse than that of England. That is not a French team. Francais Afrique. Is there such a thing? I don't fucking think so. I think it's all nonsense. Anyway, to return to the paradoxical nature of the realm of our lives. In my latest essay, you will see that I asked the question, are we in a simulated mysterium in which mystery is the universal condition for those that are paying attention? Are we supposed to know exactly what's going on in other parts of the world? Or are we supposed to just go along with the mystery, happy in the knowledge that we are both here and not here, that we're in this world but we're not of it, and that we are, perhaps, that seems likely to me, dreaming ourselves to be awake, and that this is some kind of inter-realm in which we're both here and we're not here. And if you doubt what I'm saying, think about it. For at least if you go to sleep, if you go to bed, most people will probably be asleep for between 6 and 8 hours. And when children are younger, they may even sleep up to 12 hours. But basically, the point is this. When you go to sleep at night, you leave this realm. You leave your body. You're not here. You may go to some interesting, and travel through some interesting dream worlds, or you may go to some other realm in which you feel more at home. But essentially, every night, we leave our bodies. So in that sense, we're here, but we're not here. To have it is to let it slip. To grasp it is to not hold it. The lightness is to be found in the darkness, and also in the heaviness. This is simply the paradoxical nature of the realm that we're in, of this reality, of this marvellous mental construct. And that's one of the reasons why I have really grown rather fond of G.K. Chesterton and his character Father Brown, because these contradictory elements, these paradoxes, are frequently expressed in the short stories. And at times, I have to say, they are hilarious. There's some great lines there. I mean, G.K. Chesterton was clearly something of a humorist. I mean, in one of the stories, there is the line, "I want you to follow that man with the false nose." And when I read that, and it just leapt out at the page for me, and I just found it hilarious. I couldn't, I was laughing. I was laughing my tits off, just because it just seems so incongruous. But what a funny expression. I want you to follow that man with the false nose. And of course, within that, you see, you've got this notion that we are in a false construct, that nothing is quite as it appears to be. And that's fine. That's just how it should be and how you should recognise it as such. And don't take any of it too seriously, because it's far too serious to be taken seriously, is it not? On that subject of being taken seriously, I said to Christian Waterson the other week that this was a most underrated podcast. And sometimes, modesty aside, I'm not going to deny that, because on the basis that I enjoy doing it, and that sometimes when I listen back to it, or when I'm editing it down, I'm quite taken aback by the quality of the discourse. But you know, I'm happy to be underrated. Far better to be underrated than overrated, isn't it? There's a lot of things right now that are overrated. For instance, the England football team. Multiculturalism. Diversity is our strength. Blah, de, blah, de, blah. Bullshit, bullshit. Nonsense, nonsense. Waffle, waffle, waffle. So it's all very mysterious. These lives that we have, each and every one of them, is mysterious. And I think that's exactly how it's supposed to be. And on that subject of mystery, here's a passage from G.K. Chesterton's Father Brown story called The Head of Caesar. The girl sprang to her feet and stood quite quietly, but with clenched hands, like one about to stride away. Then her hands loosened slowly, and she sat down again. "You are more of a mystery than all the others," she said desperately. "But I feel there might be a heart to your mystery." "What we dread most," said the priest in a low voice, "is a maze with no centre. That is why atheism is only a nightmare." "I will tell you everything," said the red-haired girl doggedly, "except why I am telling you, and that I don't know." Of course, one of the most beautiful aspects of fiction is that it gives the author the opportunity to express things through his characters that he might find rather difficult or be censured for saying himself. But through the imagination, truths are often expressed. And this is another fine example of what I'm talking about. In The Curse of the Golden Cross, again another Father Brown story, we have this passage. "The paradoxes are multiplying," observed Tarrant. "But surely you won't deny that Jews were persecuted in the Middle Ages." "It would be nearer the truth," said Father Brown, "to say they were the only people who were not persecuted in the Middle Ages. If you want to satirize medievalism, you can make a good case by saying that some poor Christian might be burned alive for making a mistake about homoousion. Homoousion means of the same or similar substance, while a rich Jew might walk down the street openly sneering at Christ and the Mother of God. Well, that's what the story is like. It was never a story of the Middle Ages. It was never even a legend about the Middle Ages. It was made up by somebody whose notions came from novels and newspapers, and probably made up on the spur of the moment. Anyway, from the sun-drenched broadlands of Nottinghamshire, on the border with Derbyshire, I'd like to wish you, wheresoever and whomsoever you may be, a most splendid day. I'm going to go for a cheeky pint. If you'd like to support my work, then please consider buying me a beer via the Buy Me a Coffee button and chucking a few quid into the rogue coffers by that means. All the usual stuff applies. I'm on Substack, I am on GooTube, Rumble and Facebook and Twitter, but most of all I can be found at roguemail.org. And if you would like to sign up for one of my newsletters, then you will receive that each and every Sunday as a happy accompaniment to whatever you enjoy doing on a Sunday morning. Well, not whatever you enjoy doing on a Sunday morning, because reading my newsletter whilst you're making love to the wife would not necessarily be a good thing to do. But you might enjoy it if you're having a cup of coffee out on the patio or in the conservatory or wherever you do these things. So until the next time, my friends, thank you for your kind attention. I'll catch you on the flip side. Cheers.